So let me start off just by introducing myself. My name is Ethan Green. I am the Senior Manager for Shared Value Opportunities and Policy at Everyone On. Everyone On is a national nonprofit seeking to create social and economic opportunity by connecting everybody living in the United States to the internet at home. We have been in existence since 2012. We were initially started as an FCC initiative and then branched off and became our own organization. Since that time, in the past 5 years, we've connected over 500,000 people to the internet, and our goal is to connect by 2020, 1 million people. Really create a tipping point and the opportunity to change the look and the strategies for how we get those most vulnerable in our societies and communities connected to the internet at home. And we have a number of different strategies for doing so. We work very closely with our internet service provider partners to help leverage and disseminate all of the great work that they're doing with regard to their low-cost offers, which they've created, Comcast Internet Essentials, for example, accessed by AT&T. What we've done is create what you might call like the Expedia.com or the Kayak.com for for digital inclusion and internet access. So if you're a person, you can log on to the website, or you can call or text our service. We also have an app. I'd be happy to show you both since it's just the three of us, where you can go type in your zip code and then any eligibility criteria you might have. If you have a child that is on the free and reduced cost lunch care program or lunch program, if you are Medicare or Medicaid eligible, each ISP has their own different eligibility criteria. And then based on that information, it will tell you what low-cost offers are available in your region. And from there, or in your zip code actually, and from there we can actually get you from the initial point that you start that interaction with the website to actually having a set update scheduled in about 30 minutes. And it acts as a pass-through. So some of these low-cost internet offers are as low as $10 a month. So when you consider what some of us might pay, here in DC or in New York or in other areas, having that option for $10 a month can really make or break the difference for a lot of families. Included in that information as well, alongside the internet offers, will also be resources for how you might be able to buy refurbished or low-cost devices. So because devices it's not just about having the internet in the room or in the house, you also need the device to access it, and then also places where you might be able to get digital literacy training. So a school nearby, a library, lots of information available to you. We have a number of other programs. We work very closely with the Department of Housing and Urban Development to connect public housing authorities. We just launched a new initiative called Connect Home USA, which is dedicated to, again, through a partnership with the Department of Housing and Urban Development with HUD. We're getting all public housing authorities connected to the internet and working out strategies and resources for how they might be able to do that most efficiently in their communities. We also work very closely with the private sector, partnered with Best Buy and GitHub, just to name a couple, Capital One, really trying to demonstrate all of the different ways that internet connectivity reaches us and affects our day-to-day lives. Quite frankly, the internet is agency, and a connection to the internet is a connection to the American dream. That is our philosophy. If you are going to thrive and have access to all of the opportunity available in this great country, you need a connection to the internet. There are roughly 70% of school teachers are now assigning homework almost exclusively online. 90% of job applications are online. If there were resources to be made available for other people to act, if there were, take a step back. If there were alternative channels for people to reach these resources, the internet would be what so many people describe it as a luxury. Unfortunately, in this day and age, that's simply not the case. The internet is not a luxury. And we are working day in and day out to make sure that everyone is connected. We're also trying a few new innovative ways. My work specifically, in addition to working on our policy agenda, we also are developing some very new, interesting, and innovative programs looking at the healthcare industry. Working in a program called Connect Well. I actually just returned from Georgia late last night, so I apologize if I'm a little sleepy. where we are working to launch a telehealth pilot with a small rural hospital, working to provide 100 patients with connected devices that will be preloaded with a telehealth monitoring software that will enable them to manage their diabetes at home. We're looking to replicate the results of a study that was completed by the University of Mississippi did the study in 2014. The FCC reported out these results in 2016. Healthcare alone is one of many ways that there might actually be a financial and business opportunity for connectivity and an ROI for connectivity. We're also looking at infrastructure spaces, and I'm trying to profile and create a few other of these models as well. So that's a brief little background on everyone on and what we do. Since it's just a few of us, if it's okay, you're going to see the tour guide and me coming out a little bit. I'd love to hear, meet you both and hear where you are and where you're coming from, what you like to discuss, and what information I might be able to provide to you. Sorry.
My name is Dorothy Phoenix, and I am an independent game developer.
Oh, wonderful.
And I also tutor in mostly computer science.
Oh, great.
Also some other things like writing and history and things like that.
Sure, absolutely.
And right now I'm working on a game that teaches people how to program.
Oh, how cool.
Even if they have no background experience.
Right.
And one of my main goals is to make sure it's accessible to people who are underserved.
Sure.
They probably don't have like a computer at home,
Sure.
and they or at school, they might not have AP computer science or even any teachers who could kind of guide them. And they have maybe spotty access to internet. So even if they have, I know
Spotty's being generous.
Yeah. So even if they have like a phone or something like
Sure.
that, which I noticed a lot of kids, even if they have at least like a smartphone or somebody has a smartphone,
Sure.
they might not always be able to just go and be like, okay, well I'm just going to download at any time, So that's
right.
I think what you're working on kind of overlaps with my interests.
Absolutely. Well, and from what you being on the front lines of education must see this more than a lot of us, particularly in the independent world. There are systematic issues with schools and how can we make sure that every school has strong internet capacity, but then there's a question of, are there sufficient devices, is there sufficient bandwidth, and then what happens when children leave?
Right.
What happens when they go home?
Yeah.
We refer to it as and not to be taken lightly, as the French fries for Wi-Fi strategy, where we hear about this all the time. Young students of high ambition who want to work hard and learn, they will go to a local McDonald's or a coffee shop, even a hospital. The hospital partner I was there yesterday, they said they have local families from the community that will come sit and park in the parking lot until midnight, 1 a.m. just to let their child access Wi-Fi on their phone. And if they don't have a hospital with strong Wi-Fi, they might have to go to a McDonald's, buy something off the dollar menu, and stay there until they're forced to leave, and then maybe stay in the parking lot again. There's education, the Encyclopedia Britannica, when we were growing up, it was the big book in the corner of the library, and now we're fortunate enough to be able to have it in our pockets, theoretically, as long as we can actually access it in our pockets. And the innovation, we work very closely with GitHub, and their sort of philosophy in our partnership with them was anyone that is not connected online in their youth and learning how to code and do web development like you're describing is someone who can't work at GitHub 20 years later. So it's about, when you think about this, you have to think not just for immediate concerns, but you also have to think about what the future of our economy is going to look like, what are the skills that are going to need to be had, and are we doing our absolute best to make sure that this generation is going to be prepared to enter into that economy. So that's wonderful, thank you. And the gaming approach is very interesting. I'd love to hear more.
Okay.
And are you based here?
Oh, yeah, I'm based in DC.
You're based in DC? Whereabouts?
Columbia Heights area.
Oh, okay, nice. I live in Shelton.
Oh, okay.
Okay, great. Yeah, I used to live in right in Cardozo.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, right next to the high school. So,
all right.
Yeah, no, that's great. So Dorothy, and
I'm Michelle Watts. I'm with the American University System, so I teach online.
Oh,
and I was doing a research project with a student on basically Native American connectivity. So
interesting.
So I'd be interested in hearing more about your organization. I think I just found the website. And sorry, I like to take notes and stuff on my computer. So
no, I'm the same way.
Okay. And, and one of the things that came up in my research too was like games for Native Americans, about that reinforced cultural concepts and things like that. So, I don't know if you have any experience with that kind of thing, but.
I'd love to help if you want, if you would like to discuss that. That's actually one of the things that I had on sort of my list of things to do, help maybe visit like some Native schools or something like that and help get them into gaming.
Yeah, that would be interesting. And, one of my colleagues was telling me that there's, I guess, a Native American tribe that was just recognized like last month or this year, and that's in the area. He said maybe an hour away, and they're just he said they're just starting from scratch, like developing their tribe and stuff. That might be kind of a cool, connection if you wanted to work with them. I don't know about.
Yeah, I'll have to give you my card,
Yeah.
And we can,
But yeah, and I'm interested, like in your organization, like as far as, you said you used to be affiliated with the FCC.
Correct.
And I think I'm interested in that too. Just exactly what, I don't know. I guess what your priorities are, and now you're a nonprofit, or
We're now a 501c3. Yeah. So our priority now is to make sure that everyone living in the United States is connected to the internet, bar none. That is our goal.
Survey, and are you looking at minority access, Native American access?
Absolutely. We actually work very closely, and particularly through the Connect Home USA program that I mentioned, a number of public housing authorities. Through that where we're working with a number of public housing authorities, we're also working with tribal nations as well to work and get them connected directly. It's a very different challenge there, but there is a lot of promise and a lot of desire to be connected and have full access there. We've worked with the Choctaw Nation in the past, just for example. And there's a huge amount of demand and desire there when you consider the prevalence of low-income people living in the US. These are where we're really getting into the nitty-gritty, because the assumption is, broadly speaking, that if you build it, they will come. And I'm sorry to say that is simply not the case.
Yeah.
It is a situation where, and I've seen this, so my background is actually in international development. And so people say, how did you go from international development to domestic telecom? And I say, well, this is telecom related, but I actually see this as domestic development, because this is from a enabling environment perspective, right? You could develop, in my past life in the Peace Corps, I was a HIV outreach educator. You could develop an app that could cure HIV. Great, wonderful. What about the millions of people living in sub-Saharan Africa that don't have a smartphone?
Yeah.
And even if they were to have the device, that maybe they don't have strong enough internet to download the app onto their phone. What are you going to do then? So the way that I look at this and the way that we sort of discuss these issues is to make sure that it is a three-legged stool, which is reflected in the website, of not just the access, but also the digital literacy training and also the devices as well. You've seen this all over the world. It's a global phenomenon. Because it's a human phenomenon. When you're introducing somebody to anything new, you can't just hand it to them and say, okay, figure it out. Here it is, we did it, our job is done. You can't just hand somebody pots and pans and say, okay, cook me a 5-course meal. They're not gonna know what to do, and that's through no fault of their own. You have to stand there and work with them and guide them side by side, step by step. In India, for example, there was a program called Jan Dhan Yojana. It created bank accounts for almost the entire population of the country. And they said, great, everyone's financially included. Well, they weren't using them because they didn't know how, they didn't fully understand. It was primarily a cash-based economy. And so a lot of financial technology companies, the Indian equivalents of Venmo, for example, they're now looking at different models where they actually work and maintain brick and mortar sites or stores or stalls in these communities so that people can come and speak to someone they trust to say, hi, I would really like to send money to my nephew. How do I do this? Can you help me with my phone? And they say, sure, absolutely. That's the same kind of approach that we need to have with internet connectivity here, is that we need to think at a community level, and we need to work very closely and involve our anchor institutions, our public universities, our schools, our teachers, hospitals, libraries. These are the places that people are still going to go. you can provide internet access at home, but if people don't have access to the resources they need to take full advantage of it, it's simply not going to be enough. And you see a lot of this coming true, unfortunately, in low-income places, and as evidence, or in low-income communities, because there are a lot of places where internet access is available, but people aren't signed up. There are in Washington, D.C. alone, 20% of people don't have access to the internet at home.
Really?
20%. There's internet here. It's here. It's available, but
Yeah.
cost is king. One of the largest barriers is cost. Right now, there are about 65 million unconnected people living in the United States. Around 50 of them are kept offline because of cost. Only about 15 or so are kept offline because of an access issue. So in that case, it's a supply side. Most of the cases, it's a demand. It's a demand that simply the willingness to pay is there, but the cost is just far too high. And it's really unfortunate. And you see this across the board in cities. Philadelphia, Memphis, Tennessee, Detroit, I think, has close to 39% of the city's population not connected. I could be, I'll double check those numbers, but the cost is really the issue, is an issue facing a large number of people. And that's why, when you're thinking about it from a community access point, you need to make sure that everyone has the information available to them at all times, which is why we work very closely with the website, because these plans exist. There are low-cost internet offers designed explicitly to help people in need get online, but people just might simply not know of them, and that's through nobody's fault. It's just simply they're not aware of it. And so we work very closely to increase awareness, get people working towards the website and towards the platform so that they can actually use it and get people online. And that's largely how we've been able to be so successful in connecting as many people as we have. It seems very, very simple. It seems like a very complicated problem, but there are simple solutions often to complicated problems. The other piece that we think about very closely with, and this is kind of when you start thinking maybe with tribal authorities, is again, when you're dealing with communities in need and disadvantaged communities, the story over and over again is heartbreaking, and that every time they say, I need to get myself recertified for my public housing, they have to leave their home and go somewhere else to do that. There are so many places where anytime you need something, people have to take time out of their day to go and do something. They have to go and stand in line at the DMV. Imagine if there were ways for people to go to one place and receive all the information they need. And so we're launching a program right now. We've just launched one in Rhode Island that's taking off. We're calling it the Digital Equity Check. And it's taking the information available about low-cost internet offers, digital literacy training, and where to get refurbished devices, and placing it strategically at places where people in need already go. I mentioned anchor institutions, but we're also talking social workers. We're also talking government offices. We're looking at any place where people go, where the DMV, I said that jokingly, but that's a place to go. Imagine being able to go, we'd be frustrated the first time it happened, standing an hour in line at 8 a.m. But then imagine being told once you get to the front desk, oh, here's the form, but by the way, you can go online. Oh, you don't have internet at home? Here's how you can get internet at home. And they just provide you the information and walk you through that process. And so we're trying to find ways to make this as easy as possible and to remove the barriers of process and any onerous activity or administratively burdensome activity. Let's get this out of the way for people. Let's reduce the costs and help people take advantage of the low-cost offers that are already available. Because there are so many opportunities out there for people. And once they know, you help them, you give them the resources, the time, the training, the education, they will take off. They will do this. They will take control of their own life. And that's what I mean when I say enabling environment. There are a million ways that you can provide people, ABC Mouse is a wonderful tool for educating children. We are not in the business of content creation or building educational games, right? We're not trying to build carts. We're just trying to make sure that everybody has a really good horse. That's all we're trying to do.
So when you're working with tribal nations,
Mhm.
do you have to look at alternative means? You know, because there's generally so much, you know, if they really don't have, you know, there's some areas where they may have access and they just don't know it.
Sure.
There's other areas where they really don't have
Where they're
access.
simply, and that's when we're getting into, like I mentioned, those 15 million people
Yeah.
where access really is the issue. We're exploring a number of different strategies in terms of looking at the role of infrastructure and following the infrastructure bill that's hopefully coming out of the White House soon to see what might be included there. Because rural broadband has been such a large push for the administration.
Yeah.
I personally don't work very closely with the tribal authorities, but if you give me a card, I'd be happy to put you in touch with my colleague Amber, who does, and she would be able to speak much more to that capacity and what the strategies working with them has been like.
Oh, yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be very
Yeah,
happy.
someone had asked me earlier about, you know, whether they're considering using, you know, I guess like Google in like, you know, African countries will have, this was news to me, but it was like, you know, different means of providing access like balloons and
Right.
things like that where you don't need the infrastructure.
That's right. So a couple things about that. One, those are wonderful things. I mean, what you're talking about, the Project Loon, that's been used to reconnect. I think the last article I read was over 100,000 people in Puerto Rico after the hurricane. That having those balloons floating overhead has been able to restore internet connectivity. We are completely technology agnostic. If it's infrastructure, if it's balloons, if it's planes, if it's parachutes. We really have no opinion here. As long as it gets people connected and it works and it's strong and it's reliable, that's fine. Right now, the strongest, and in that name, right now the strongest and most reliable internet is we adopt the FCC standards for high-speed telecommunications access, which is a download-upload ratio of 25 megabits to 3 megabits, 25 to 3.
Yeah, someone mentioned today, which also I hadn't heard, that they are proposing lowering that.
There is nothing official, there is no policy yet that is happening. It has been floated as a possibility. So when you consider the difference between wired broadband versus mobile broadband, they have different speeds. They have different speed requirements. So the 25.3, that's for wired. The
Yeah.
10:1 is for mobile. And so if you change the definition of what high speed or high quality telecommunications access is, that will change it. But there's nothing been officially stated at this point. Nothing has been decided yet. There's always chatter of what may or may not happen. So there's a lot going on. And there are very good government programs that are out there that could really assist people, and so we're trying to make sure that those are working smoothly as well, and make sure that everyone has, through whatever channel, like I said, we're agnostic. However you get your internet, as long as you're connected, we're okay. We hope you don't steal it, but but no, that's really our case. So if it's the Loon, we love cutting edge tech. I was reading the other day about what did they call it? Li-Fi, where it would be internet that's beamed through light beams, so that it could be, a halogen lamp could be your internet source. Great, that's absolutely. As long as the connection's strong and it's reliable. That's our big concern.
And I think it's great that you also mentioned digital literacy
Right.
too, because I had a situation where I was teaching a class of underserved students, and we were at a college campus, and the computers, we were not able to log into them because the IT had they changed the passwords or something like that. So,
Oh, you're kidding.
So we're like, okay, well, we're sitting here trying to figure out what to do. And I was like, okay, well, can we, is there something you guys can go home and do? And
Sure.
they were like, nah, they don't have, they don't have the access and the equipment at home. Then the
We
next
need to stay
time,
here.
yeah, then the next time, the next class, I had a backup plan, but this time the projector didn't work, so they were supposed to follow along with what I was doing.
Right.
And then it was hard because I had handouts for everyone.
Right.
And one of the steps was go to this site and download something. I
Sure.
go, well, I don't know how to download. I don't know how to save a file. I don't
Right.
know how to open
Exactly.
a file. I don't know how to
How do you Google search?
Right.
Where is Google? How do I open Google?
What in Microsoft Word? What is that?
Right.
You know, or Notepad?
Mhm.
I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I'm looking at is that this game, this program would have to have something where if you are at that, it would have to address different levels.
That's right.
Because some people are not, you know, and if you can't do that, then you're stuck. You know, how are you going to learn how to program even like Hello World?
Absolutely.
You know, if you can't open and save a file or download or figure out where you download it.
I mean,
you know?
the foundations are almost more critical than the finer, you know, than the more advanced techniques of you know,
Right.
coding or
Right.
Yeah.
or web development or graphic design. You know, without these elements, these are the elements of what it's going to take to navigate any job in the future. You know, as digitization, automation increases, you have to think about what it's going to take, and that's why we put so much attention on encouraging digital literacy training, working with partners who work explicitly on this to make sure that we have resources available, knowledge banks. You can't have one without the other. All are necessary on their own, but none are sufficient on their own.
It's like you can't take things for granted. You know?
No, absolutely.
Like I would take for granted that, you know, people have a certain level of, or even like reading
Absolutely.
skills. You know, like they're not going to, for some kids, if they have to sit down and read like a technical paragraph, and this is even from students who were well off that I tutored. You know, they're just like, okay, well that whole sentence that was just what?
What was that?
Yeah. And I've seen like a lot of games and programs that are geared towards, well, you know, this is a beginner friendly, you know, and I was like, no, you got to break that down a little bit more. You know?
Again, it's about meeting people where they are.
Exactly.
Not
Exactly.
expecting them to come to you,
Right.
because that will work for a lot of people. But if you really want to have as many game developers as you're trying to build here, you got to meet them where they are. And it's not a question of their abilities. They're smart. They can learn it if you give them the opportunity and you give them the time.
Right.
And you give them and you're patient with them. It's the case with that. My brother's a middle school principal, so we hear this all the time. You've got to meet kids where they are.
Yeah.
You've got to find ways to keep them interested and get them engaged where they are. You know, if it's turning a physics lesson into a pumpkin launching competition, which we did, but it worked. The kids were thrilled with it.
Yeah.
But it's a simple adjustment. And so building games, you know, a lot of kids really want to be building games. They really want to be doing that. They want to be designing clothes. They want to, they want to build. They're builders. They're innovators. All these kids now, when they see what they're able to do on their phones, even, they want to learn how to do that bigger and better.
Right. We ended up doing like a Minecraft lesson.
Oh,
I don't know
cool.
if you know about Minecraft,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
like I was trying to tell them about something, and then again that lecture format doesn't work for everybody.
Right.
And they were like, well, they were trying to figure out how to like start a Minecraft server. I'm like, well, that's computer science. So
Right,
let's
absolutely.
use that. Let's talk about what that means.
Right.
You know, and once we got that, you know, and it was ingenious how they were figuring out how to get these like accounts set up and everything.
Oh,
and,
cool.
and you know, I was like, okay, well, I don't want to encourage you guys to do anything illegal.
Right. Absolutely. You never want to encourage this.
But you
It's
know,
never okay.
I know what's happening, and I'm just gonna pretend like I didn't see that. But you know, let's go ahead and.
I'm gonna pretend I didn't hear that. What? Never.
Yeah.
No, that's great. But it's the same principle of this is a human condition. This is not specific to digital literacy. Just in the same way that teaching people how to use a calculator instead of an abacus took time. You know, this is a condition. Financial education. It's hard to learn in a classroom setting. It's boring. No one, you know, but if you find a different way to go about it, you can sit one-on-one with someone and go through it in person, work with it your own, and figure it out on your own because it's been designed to meet you. You're going to learn something. You're going to get something out of it. And you're not going to see that level of confusion and frustration that will further alienate you from the technology.
Right.
You know,
Right.
we think of technology as, you know, touch screens and glowing panels and et cetera, but, you know, remembering at a time that the plow was the most technological was the greatest technological advancement to be seen in the history of humanity. You have to think about it in that way, and how long did it take for that to become widespread? You have to also, again, take time and be purposeful and intentional with our expansion of this technology and the way that we go about it. So if it's developing games or going to tribal communities, having youth volunteers live on the communities, training them, do a training of trainer models so that they can adapt and learn on their own. The possibilities are endless. There's no one way or one wrong way to do it. It's about getting community buy-in and making sure that everyone understands and finds the value in it. Because there was a report that came out that was done by Pew a few years ago that said, oh, people don't see the relevancy in getting on, and that's the biggest barrier to getting people online. Further data indicated that cost was a greater area, as we've already discussed. But the relevancy bit is not about looking and fully understanding this thing called the internet and saying, oh no, that's not relevant to my life. It was about having a limited understanding of what this was and what it would enable you to do, and saying that limited understanding was not relevant. So once you start engaging, we have a regional manager down in Miami who just completed an incredible pilot program training senior citizens how to get online and in assisted living communities.
Where is this?
In Miami, Florida.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so she went through training programs, weekly trainings. They did surveys at the end on Google Forms. Nothing very complicated. How do you Google something? How do you use Google Maps? How do you Skype? They get to talk to their grandkids every day. That's a big thing. The ability, but they didn't. There was the understanding the difference between calling your grandkids and being able to see their faces is a huge difference, and being able to fully understand that. And she's seen incredible results. From the surveys, everyone found it relevant. They thought that each lesson was important. They understood how it built. This is achievable. And this is not above anyone's head. People say it's too complicated for me. It's not.
Yeah.
If you work with them, if you meet them where they are, and are patient with them. And that's what we're trying to do this, and just make sure that everyone knows that this is how you do it. So we're trying to build the playbook around this. What are the things that you need to keep in mind? How do you get a community invested in getting online, and how do you get individuals invested in being online? And then how do you go about training them to do it and making sure all the resources are there and that they have everything that they need? It's wonderful.
So how do you guys get funding?
We have a lot of corporate funding and some foundational funding, but no government, government grants at all. So.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So private foundations, individual donors, corporate donors, things like that.
And is any of the data you collect available, or is that all?
The majority of it, if you have specific, I'll leave my card with both of you. If you have specific questions, I'd be happy to provide it to you. We're going through a bit of a website redesign now.
Okay.
So if it's not available on the website, I'd be happy to send you some resources and articles, everything publicly available. Resources that I've used in the past or that we use to calculate some of our numbers or things like that. I'd be very happy to send that to you both if you have any other questions.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. This was wonderful. Thank you guys.